Hello guys, welcome to the second part of your lesson 7 for functions. And in this particular session, we're going to do a practical demonstration of how to use functions and how to go about functions when we've created them. So this is just say a follow-up on the concepts we did for the part 1. And this is just going to be using the same information used in part 1. So if you watch this video and you still have some doubt, you can still clear that with the first video. It's more like the same thing, just that with this particular one, we're using practical demonstration because this will also aid you in doing your assignment and also for further lessons. So as we mentioned earlier on, so when it gets to functions, we have two main types of functions, ones which are created by you as a programmer and the ones which come with the programming language as inbuilt functions. We saw a classical example or some examples of functions where we saw print as a function, and we also saw another one called input as a function. This is used to collect information from a user. We'll see how both of them is used later on. And then, yeah. So again, I still remain the same person. I'm still George Bamfo, as you can see. And this particular session will be a very good one. So just keep following along. If you have any questions, just send that to me on the platform. All right, so let's start with defining a function in Python. So as I mentioned earlier on, if you want to define a function, what you would have to do is to, first of all, so we want to create a function. And in this function, we want to call it add. Well, let's start with a very simple one. We're going to do a function that is also going to be doing greetings, like we said for the first one. So we create a function called greeting. And this particular function will have no parameters. And what we expect it to do is to just print out maybe hello world. This is a very quick one and a very simple one. So what we have to do is first off, define a function. In order for you to define a function, use the keyword def, so def, and the name of the function, we call it a greeting, and opening and closing the bracket. We're going to end the line and move to the block of code by using the colon. Press the enter key because this particular function will not have any parameter, so it's going to be an empty function. And what are we expecting the function to do? We want it to just display hello world. That's all we're asking of the function. So this is we creating a function called greeting and then giving it an instruction to print out hello world anytime someone calls this function. As I mentioned, creating a function is just like saying you create a box somewhere and then inside the box you have, say, another box called greeting. And you say when anybody picks this box, it should display whatever is in there. It's saying it should display hello world. So this is what we've just done. We've created a box, we kept it somewhere. Now we want to use it. So that's what we call you invoking a function, you invoking or you calling a function. So when we say you call a function, it's more like saying you're using a function to do something. Okay, so in order for us to call the function from our previous lesson, we said you just have to give the name of the function. And if it doesn't go with a parameter, so you just open and close the parentheses, and that's how you call a function. So with this particular one, what we'll do is, first of all, we run the second cell, and then we come on the next line, and we want to call the function. So we say greeting, opening and closing, and that's all you need. So once I run this, it should display hello world. So we could see hello world down there, and this is how you create a function and you call the function in Python. All right. The next thing we're going to see is the other one we did where you have some parameters. So we'll say functions that come with a parameter. So I'll just give a comment saying function that come with a parameter. As I mentioned in the previous part, we said a parameter is more like a variable. So we're creating a function called add. So def, we say add. All right. So we wanted to have two parameters, so two variables. num1 and num2. Now, what do we want to do? We want to say num1 and num2 are going to be added, so and going to be assigned to a variable called sum. So num1, num2 will give us sum. So we just have to print sum at the end. And then whenever we call this with the parameters, we'll get a value. So let's see how that works out. First of all, we need to define a function called add. And that's going to have two parameters, num1, comma, num2. All right. So at the end of the function, we're going to have a colon just to signify we're entering a block, and we'll say sum equal num1 plus num2. And we'll say when that's done, we should print sum. All right. So what we're saying is we have to, this is just what we have here, two variables. And once we put the variables, the values of the variables here, and we call it, in order for us to call it, we use two numbers. So let's say we'll use 2 and 4. So in order for us to call it, we'll say, so add into bracket 2, 4. And that's all we need to call the function. In the backend, this is what will be happening. We'll be going in there to say 2 plus 4, which is equal to 6. And as we said, we print in the sum. So we'll print sum, and the value that will be displayed will be 6. All right, so let's see that in action in a few seconds. All right, so I go here, I run my code, and then now let me call it. I'll call it add. So 2, 4. And if I run this, it should print out 6. So it's printing out 6 because it's replacing the values. If I call it another time, and this time I'm giving new value, say 10, 120, what do we think the answer should be? Yes, you're right. Guess it's as right as mine. So that'll be 10 plus 120, which is going to be 130. Yeah. So we're going to run this code, and let's see how that goes. All right, so when I run this, it's printing 130. Yes, as I said, your guess is as good as mine. The next one we're going to be considering, you can play around the numbers, but in your own spare time. The next one we're going to consider is the return statement. So as we mentioned in our previous lesson, we said return statement doesn't really do when we have, say, for example, when we define a variable, we're going to use the same variable. This time, sorry, we're going to create a similar one, but this time we're using subtraction. So we say def subtraction, subtract, and then we'll say num1, num2. And we say difference be equal to num1 minus num2. And rather than printing, we'll say return diff. Yes. All right. Basically, what we're saying is we define a variable called subtract, and it should also take two parameters. But this time around, the two parameters are going to be subtracted rather than added, and we're going to assign the value to what we call def. And rather than printing, we'll say, okay, keep it somewhere. And if we have to use it, we'll use it. You'll see what I mean by that in a few minutes. So let's see this. Let me make a bit of space. So let's see this. We're saying creating a variable called subtract. Sorry, not a variable, function. It should also take two parameters, num1, num2. And that will be inside a block of code. We have num1 minus num2. And rather than print it, we'll say return. We'll say return diff. Okay, so when we run this is we creating the function. And then if you call it, say subtract. And again, we're going to give two values, so 2, 4. So basically 2, 4 is supposed to be 2 minus 4. When we go into this, and that will be minus 2. How do we know that? Because 2 will be here, 4 will be here. So 2 minus 4 will give us minus 2. So when we run this, minus 2, in effect, in normal sense, this shouldn't display anything if we're using the normal text editor. We'll just be storing it somewhere. But basically, when we run this, it should be storing it in a variable somewhere. It will store it somewhere, say minus 2. And when we call it, it will be used. Okay, so that's how return is used. All right, so let's see an example of how you will use it. So rather than do that, you may want to do maybe something like this. Maybe answer, and you say equal to subtract maybe 5, 4. And you run this. So when we print answer, then it's going to print out 1. So basically it's doing the same thing as we saw earlier on. Yeah. All right. The next thing we're going to see is going to talk about inbuilt functions. Now, print was an inbuilt function, so we didn't have to create it. It was created by Python. So when we use the word print in and the parentheses, if you could see clearly, it's similar to what we're doing here. The only thing is that print was created not by us, but by Python, and whoever created Python. So when we just say hello world and we run that, it should print out hello world. This is an inbuilt function that comes with the Python language. So if you want to learn more about Python functions, so you go onto the website for Python, which is python.org. Under that, you go to where you have your documentation, and you'll be able to see lots of information of functions and also about inbuilt functions that come with Python. We have other ones like input. So we'll look at the last one, which is the input, and then we'll wrap up this session. So let's look at input. Okay, so when we talk about input, let's say sometimes you would want a user to send information to your system. Let's say you ask them, you give them a prompt like, who are you? Or what is your name? And you expect the person to put their name. So let's say I'll put my name, George, and maybe you use the answer for something that you could say, welcome, George. And there is a particular function that will help you to collect information from a user, and that's what we refer to as the input function. So this is how we're going to use it. Because we would have to store the information we're getting from the user somewhere, I'll create a variable called so name, and then I'll use input, but I would want to prompt them to put something. So I'll say, what is your name? And I'll end that with the sign which says escape, or move me to a new line. So it's asking you, what is your name? So I'll say George. Now, the name George will be stored in a variable called name. So the value of name is George at this point in time. So now if I print out if I print something like welcome, say George, oh sorry, name. So welcome name, it should say, oh, sorry, that was a mix-up. If I should print out something like welcome, maybe George, no, name, welcome name, can give a space here and it should print out welcome George. There are other ways of printing out. I could have also said maybe use the F format. That was what I was looking for earlier on. So I could have done this and then I'll say welcome. And then inside I'll say name. And at this point, it will still print out welcome George. So these are different ways of writing it. Either you do this and then you put a variable outside the thingy, or you create an F format. So with the F format, you are able to just put a curly bracket inside your string and put the name of the variable there, but start with an F. This is how the F format will be like. So yeah, if you have any more questions on this particular topic of functions, you could send that to me on the Daja platform and I'll respond to it as soon as I get it. Don't forget to do the assignment that comes with this particular topic because it is very important you do that, and it may be and will be used as your as the requirement for taking you on to the next lesson or as part of your unit qualification. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.